Well, times are extremely tight for many Canadians. The cost of basics climbed during the pandemic. They haven't come down since, and that has led to renewed calls for the implementation of a guaranteed basic income. Senator Kim Pate has been one of the leading voices of that campaign. She's in Whitehorse, and she's been meeting with Yukoners, and she hastily joins me now. Just got in the studio in time. Good afternoon, Senator.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate you coming on. So you had a meeting this afternoon, I understand, with some Yukoners.
I did. Thank you to Senator Pat Duncan, your senator, the senator from the Yukon, your MP, as well as the Yukon Anti-Poverty Caucus. They organized an incredible meeting. It was rich with discussion and many good, very good questions about how this would roll out, not just here, but across the country. So I was very pleased to be here.
Well, tell me about some of the things that people, you're meeting with people who will benefit, who need this sort of thing. So what sorts of concerns and did you hear about it?
Well, the first one is, how soon could this happen? And I wish I could say it would happen today. I have 11 years left in the Senate, and I said if I don't cark it before, it'll happen as quickly as we possibly can get it. Unfortunately, the bill that I've introduced is, as we've talked about before, a piece of framework legislation, which means that it would only get the ball rolling, much like the disability benefit that we're waiting to have rolled out was a piece of framework legislation. So that was one question. Another was, will it be enough? Because right now there's nowhere in this country. Yukon is doing a very good job of trying to reform it. You're in the midst of those reforms right now, and I had a great conversation with Minister McPhee, with Senator Duncan as well yesterday, and it's very clear there's a huge effort to make things better here, and you didn't claw back CERB here, which did happen in many other provinces, and sadly meant that people ended up worse off. We also heard from people about what does that mean to be adequate, because right now there is nowhere in this country where people can survive on what they're getting on social assistance. We also heard about what about people new to the country, community working with people trying to get here from Ukraine and from other areas of the world where they're being forced, and the forced migration we're seeing. So those were some of the questions. Some great questions also about how this rolls out for First Nations, whether it's self-governing or non-self-governing. We talked also about the work we've been doing with First Nations and with Inuit and Métis across the country, as well as nationally, in terms of their national governance bodies. So great questions. I don't always have the answers, but it's part of the reason I'm wanting to meet with folks, and so grateful for you and so many others. I mean, there were quite a few people there and a number from the media as well, who were interested. So that's fantastic, because it really is something we're hearing from people. Unfortunately, too many politicians are lagging behind. Senators, it's easy. We're appointed. Elected officials are often reluctant to jump on something that they won't see the benefit within their electoral period sometimes, and so they're reluctant to jump on it, even though it is one of the number one policy issues for every party. As
you describe it, one of the things that strikes me is like the challenge of just running a country like Canada. It's so big, our population is growing, but still relative to almost everybody else, there's not that many people on this vast territory, different cultures, different approaches, different jurisdictions. Something like guaranteed basic income, it would be a challenge because everybody's situation is a little bit different.
It would be a challenge, but no more challenging than what we're doing now, which is spending more than $80 billion keeping people in poverty with a whole patchwork. Not a tapestry, a patchwork of programs with all of their own administration, all of the costs that goes along with that. And so what we're talking about is really streamlining that economic part. Of course, we need individualized community-based approaches for things like housing and for supports, whether it's addiction supports, whether it's particular issues for Indigenous peoples. Those can be dealt with on a regional or a local municipal basis. But when we're talking about the financial part, there is no reason. We saw during the pandemic, the only program that was able to roll out resources right across the country was through Revenue Canada. Why not improve that process and look at, the financial part of EI, which has shown to be not fit for purpose. Keep all of the great programs about work, job training and supports, but let's take the financial part and administer it in the most cost-effective way.
We did speak before, and I know I asked you this question, but I'll ask you again. Like, give people, when we talk about guaranteed basic income, what exactly are we talking about? What would it look like?
Well, from my perspective, it would look like, the financial part would look like a streamlining of benefits that exist right now. Now, that's not what the bill does. The bill says, let's have this discussion. And I'm quite open. If there are people who have way better ideas than me, I don't presume to have the best ideas in the world by a long shot. And the people that are, the reason I've come up with that view, though, is based on people who have been living in poverty, people who have been studying it, people who have invested in new approaches, and people who know a whole lot more than I do about what we could be doing with the economic system. So I also think we need to look at the taxation system and make it more fair for everybody. Right now, what's really clear is the divide between those who have the most and those who have the least is becoming worse. We see it on the streets. You see it here. I mean, talk about inhospitable environments to be homeless. And in Ottawa, it's not as cold. Well, sometimes it's as cold, but we have harsh winters in this country and for most parts of the country. And the fact that people are living living out on the street and sleeping out on the street, or our shelters are overburdened. Meanwhile, we keep pumping money into things like prisons and other places where people end up, and people end up for short periods of time. They cost great amounts of money. Why not invest those resources into supporting people in the community? And I'm not saying don't hold people accountable. Of course, I mean that. But I've just spent, more than 40 years watching us pump, billions of dollars into prisons and not paying attention to the fact that who's going in there are mostly the people who are most impoverished, and who's coming out. They don't come out with the supports to then survive in the community. And so it becomes a vicious cycle. As well, we're seeing, as you're seeing here, the lack of housing for people. I can't tell you how many people who are homeless have said, if I was housed and I could be supported to volunteer to build, whether it's through Habitat for Humanity or some other, through one of the many incredible nonprofits, whether it's through the Anti-Poverty Coalition, to develop tiny homes, whatever it is, I would happily do that and invest back into our community. We don't even provide people with those opportunities. There's so much creativity and so much opportunity, and we're wasting the human potential. You
mentioned something that is a challenge for any new and bold idea in a democracy, in that, it's how do you make politicians who won't be around to see the benefits of it care, because they'll hear it's just going to cost money. It's just helping people who can't help themselves. And the other thing, of course, a lot of the people who will be most directly affected by this, the numbers have shown, don't vote a whole lot. So,
right. Yeah, and I think that's one of the issues. These are people, that's why I think Pat and I, Senator Duncan and I, are interested in this, because part of our role as senators is to look at the long-term interests of the country and to look at those who aren't otherwise represented by elected officials. And that's why I'm interested in this, because I think we should be looking at how we are spending now over $80 billion a year to keep people in poverty. I have yet to meet a person, whether they characterize themselves as conservative or liberal or NDP or socialist, however they characterize them, or apolitical, who doesn't want to see that kind of money invested far better, and so that it's effective, that it's assisting people to rebound out of poverty, out of homelessness, out of joblessness, or to allow them to take care of other people in times when that's what they need to be doing.